3 sinister true stories of stalkers exposed. Haunting encounters with the cursed unknown. The evening sun dipped below the horizon, casting a blood-red hue over Sarah's quiet suburban neighborhood in Ohio. Shadows twisted like gnarled fingers against the eerie silence, echoing with something sinister lurking just beyond the edge of her thoughts. As a single mother, Sarah always made sure to keep things fun and light with her daughter Emma, but tonight felt different. After their usual late-night pizza ritual and classic horror movies, the air shifted and a cold dread settled in Sarah's stomach. "Mom, do you ever get that feeling like you're being watched?" Emma's voice was soft, her eyes wide. Before Sarah could respond, her phone buzzed. An unknown number flashed across the screen, and her heart raced. "I see you." For a moment, disbelief swallowed her fear. "Just a prank, right?" she murmured to herself, but as the night wore on, an unease settled over her like a thick fog. Unexplainable sounds broke the quiet, the creaking of floorboards, faint whispers brushing against her ears. Emma claimed she heard children laughing outside, but there were no children. Just darkness, swallowing their world whole. The once cozy sanctuary of their home twisted into a cage of paranoia. Days bled into nights, and with each passing moment, Sarah felt the shadows growing closer. A neighbor's cat went missing. A dog was found wandering, frantic and trembling. Each event whispered of something more awful beneath the surface. As she walked Emma to school, her eyes darted from one house to the next. Mr. Hoffman's watchful gaze felt like a spotlight shining on them, too intense. In the distance, the new family seemed strange. Their obsession with the neighborhood's folklore did not sit right. Digging deeper into the town's history, Sarah discovered tales of a sinister spirit who thrived on fear, haunting those who were vulnerable. As she pieced the story together, her heart hammered against her ribcage. Was this truly just folklore, or had someone come to life from those forgotten tales? Then came that night, the night of the crash. Heart-thumping, Sarah peered through the curtains to catch a glimpse. A figure stood at the edge of her yard, barely illuminated by the streetlight. The feeling of being watched washed over her, the air thick with fear. The figure vanished before her eyes, disappearing into nothingness. Panic clawed at her throat as she took a step back, shaking. This wasn't just anxiety, it was real. Something dark hung over their lives. How could she protect Emma when the danger felt so intangible, buried within the well-lit comfort of their neighborhood? Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system, and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Each bump in the night became a tight grasp on her heart. Was she losing her mind? The creeping thought of not being alone turned her into a detective, sifting through every piece of their neighborhood's dark fabric. Faces she once knew became mere masks hiding darkness beneath. The fear consumed her, escalating with every unanswered question. As Sarah's resolve solidified, pulling Emma close became her everything. The whispers grew louder, and the figure loomed ever closer. Just when she thought she might uncover the truth, her phone buzzed again. A final, chilling message broke into her world. "You're next." Fear gripped her as she glanced towards the window, knowing that the shadows, once an everyday view, now harbored something profoundly terrifying. The night became a labyrinth of dread, and just as she thought she'd found her way out, the walls trembled. With a haunting question that lingered in the air, what if the threat was already inside? The following day dawned gray and heavy, mirroring the weight in Sarah's chest. Each morning felt like a prologue to an unspoken horror, and every creak of the house echoed like a warning bell. She tried to dismiss the shadows creeping into her mind, but she couldn't shake the chill wrapping around her soul. "Mom, can I go play at Mia's?" Emma asked, clutching her backpack like a life preserver. The innocent eagerness in her daughter's voice turned Sarah's heart to stone. "Not today, sweetheart," she replied, forcing a smile. "Let us stay inside. We can bake some cookies. Just the two of us." Emma frowned, but compliance edged her features. They settled into the small, warm kitchen, and for a moment, The familiar scent of flour and chocolate made Sarah forget, if only for a heartbeat, the lurking dread. Yet as they mixed the ingredients, a banging sound echoed from the living room. What was that? Emma's eyes widened. Probably the wind, Sarah said, though her pulse quickened. She forced herself to investigate, despite the clenching fear in her gut. Rounding the corner of the kitchen, she caught sight of something dark and twisted beneath the overturned sofa, a note, stained with something dark and wet. Trembling, she reached for it, her heart racing as she tore it open. The message was crude, scrawled in a jagged hand. I see you both. The fun has just begun. This couldn't be real. Panic surged through her as she crumpled the note in her fist. The kitchen shrank around her, walls closing in. She turned to Emma, who stood wide-eyed, confusion etched upon her face. Stay here. Don't move, Sarah commanded, each word a struggle to contain her rising panic. She pushed through the living room door and glanced out through the peephole. Nothing. Just the stark emptiness of the porch. Her phone chimed again, jolting her back into a cold reality. Look behind you, the message read. She felt the blood drain from her face. The air in the room thickened. Slowly, she turned, dread settling in the pit of her stomach. There was no movement. No one there. Breathing heavily, she stepped back into the kitchen, locking eyes with her terrified daughter. That wasn't funny, Emma exclaimed, her fear palpable. It's not a joke. We need to lock the doors. Now. As they bolted the doors, shadows in the corners of the house seemed to twist and shudder under the flickering lights. The day faded into more restless hours of being trapped. Her world turned into a sardine can. Each time the wind rattled the windows, she imagined a face lurking outside, watching, waiting. Mom, can we watch a movie? Emma asked, her voice tinged with fear, hope colliding within her innocent heart. Sure, let us find something funny. But as they sat down and began to stream their favorite comedy, laughter hung between them like a fragile thread, ready to snap. Then came the unmistakable sound, a gentle tapping on the back door, rhythmic and deliberate. Not the wind. Sarah's heart thrashed against her ribcage like a caged animal. It stopped suddenly. The stillness that followed was louder than any scream. Every instinct screamed for her to run, but fear locked her in place. Emma's face grew pale, confusion turning to fear. Paralyzed in her seat, Sarah could hardly breathe. The tapping resumed, a ghostly rhythm echoing in her mind. Mom, Emma whispered, what is that? Every second felt like eternity. As she hesitated longer, blood pounding in her ears, a shadow flickered through the kitchen window. A figure, partially silhouetted against the gray light, loomed closer. Who's there? Sarah's voice trembled. No answer came, only a knowing smile that spread across the figure's face, and suddenly warmth drained from the room. The shadows bent closer. Just as she thought she could confront the darkness, a voice, heavy and hoarse, drifted through the door. It's time to play. In that moment, Sarah's heart dropped. The nightmare was only just beginning, and she had a chilling realization. The figure behind the darkness wasn't a stranger, it was someone she recognized. What if it was someone she already trusted? Fear twisted inside Sarah's chest, a visceral knot tightening with every heartbeat. She glanced at Emma, whose young eyes reflected a blend of confusion and terror, making her mother feel the weight of her responsibility all the more sharply. What had she done to bring them here? Stay close, honey, Sarah murmured, her voice barely rising above a whisper. She moved toward the door, heart hammering against her ribs, a metronome marking the rhythm of dread. Each step felt weighted, as if the floor beneath her was pulling her back, urging her to a safer distance. The tapping continued, rhythmic and unyielding, rising up like a song of madness within the house. Mom, it's really creepy. Emma took a half-step back, her tiny body instinctively seeking the refuge of her mother's presence. I know, but we have to see who it is. Maybe it's just someone lost. Maybe she hesitated. Maybe it's someone who can help us. With each passing moment, the erratic thumping on the door grew louder. The light flickered again, and shadows danced just at the edge of her vision. She hesitated, hand resting on the doorknob, freezing at the thought of what might be on the other side. Suddenly, the figure at the window thrust itself closer, its face illuminated by the dim light. Her breath caught in her throat. It was unmistakably her husband, Mark. But how could this be? He had been gone for weeks, missing, with no trace. Mark, she screamed, her voice brimming with desperation, tears pooling in her eyes. Relief surged through her, but it crashed just as quickly under the weight of suspicion. The smile on his face was disconcerting, almost wrong. It didn't reach his eyes. They were empty, sunken, and dark. "It's me, Sarah. I've been looking for you," he said, his voice coated in a strange, sickly sweetness. Fear tangled with confusion in her mind. "We thought you were who cares what you thought?" He interrupted, a sharp edge cutting through his tone. For a fleeting second, she saw a flash of something dark behind that familiar gaze. "I've come for you both, together," Emma whimpered beside her, sensing the danger wafting off her mother. Sarah couldn't let him in, not if he was the man they once knew. "Stay back," she yelled, stepping defensively in front of Emma, her heart racing. The tapping turned violent as if spurred by her defiance. Mark's demeanor shifted, the false smile distorting into something wicked, his voice hardening. "You have no idea what's out here, Sarah. It wants you. It wants both of you." Sarah's mind screamed to flee, but her body refused to move, gripped by the conflict of fear and the deep-rooted love for a man she thought she knew. She could feel it. Whatever was lurking in the shadows was moving closer, drawn to the chaos echoing through the house. "What do you mean?" Sarah pressed, her voice trembling. "What is going on?" He leaned closer, his breath ghosting through the cracks. "You don't want to know, but trust me. You can't stay locked up here forever." Suddenly, a crash erupted from the living room. The windows rattled violently, as if a tempest had decided to breach their sanctuary. In that instant, reality cracked wide open. The figure outside the real one had stepped from the shadows. The moment Sarah caught the glimpse of a familiar silhouette, a frigid wave of terror washed over her. "Mom!" Emma's terrified scream drew her attention back to the door just as it burst open. The figure, cloaked in darkness, surged forward, taking in everything. It was no longer just Mark. "Run, Emma!" Sarah cried, adrenaline igniting within her. But would they escape this time, or was their fate already sealed with the return of someone they thought they could trust? Moments felt like hours as Sarah's mind raced, trying to map an escape. There it was again. Mark's voice lingered like smoke, echoing, taunting. "Let the games begin." And somewhere beneath those words, the chilling question echoed in her heart: would they survive the night? Sarah's instincts screamed at her to flee, to grab Emma and burst through the back door into the chaos of night. But the darkness behind her was just as threatening as the figure that now occupied the threshold. She could feel it pressing against her, a tangible force that twisted her stomach into knots. "Mom, please." Emma's voice quaked, pulling Sarah back to focus. It was a plea that pierced through her haze of fear. She turned to face her daughter, urgency igniting every fiber of her being. "Stay behind me," Sarah said firmly. She stepped into the entryway, heart racing as she dared to glance back at Mark. The twisted grin on his face sent ice coursing through her veins. Was he still her husband, or something far worse? His eyes glinted with an unnatural light, and he tilted his head, as if studying her carefully. "You're so close, Sarah. Just let me in, and we can end this madness. You have no idea what waits outside." Each word dripped with a sickly sweetness, laced with an undercurrent of threat. With trembling fingers, Sarah tightened her grip on the doorknob. The sense of foreboding choked her, but she had to protect Emma. She needed to stall him. "What do you want, Mark?" she asked, trying to sound brave. She didn't recognize this voice anymore. "Isn't it obvious?" he replied, stepping fully into the light. The shadows danced across his skin like dark flames, flickering and alive. "I want to take you home." Home, the word clawed at her, a reminder of the warmth and security they had lost. Behind him, the living room had fallen into darkness, but she could hear it, the low hum of something sinister stirring just behind the veil of their reality. An insistent scratching, like nails dragging against the wall, desperate to break in. "Listen to me." Sarah shot back, desperation now coloring her tone. "You're not my Mark. Where have you been? Why did you leave us?" Her heart raced, each question compelling her to hold on to the last thread of hope flickering within her. Mark paused, his smile fading. The flickering light illuminated something ghastly and twisted, a glimpse of the man she had known. "You have no idea how hard it was to find you," he murmured, his voice dropping to a hushed rasp, "or how many horrors I had to face." For a moment, just a moment, Sincerity flashed across his features, but it vanished as quickly as it came, replaced by a smirk so twisted it made her stomach churn. "Let us go." Emma's voice rang out, fragile yet emboldened. It cut through the tension and landed heavy in the air. Mark's expression darkened. You think you have a choice?" He snapped sharply, and the floor beneath them creaked as the weight of something unseen pressed in. "This is your home now." Suddenly, the somber grip of the shadows erupted. They were alive, swirling and writhing, reaching for them with the claws of fear. Sarah felt the oppressive weight descend, forcing her to take a step back, closer to the open door. "Run!" Sarah screamed, yanking Emma's hand, intent on breaking free from whatever nightmare awaited them. They raced past Mark, who just watched, a still figure against the chaos thrumming around them. They bolted into the living room, only to skitter to a halt. Every window was now a gaping maw of darkness. The scratching grew louder, a cacophony of whispers echoing her name, their voices warping her mind. "What is that?" Emma darted her eyes around, the terror making her breath hitch. "It doesn't matter. We have to go?" There was no choice left now. Desperation hardened her voice. As they moved toward the back door, the darkness surged forward, and shadows wrapped around the space like a thick fog. Just as they reached for the handle, a whisper curled into the air, sweet and horrid. "You can't run from your fate, Sarah." The lights flickered violently, drawing her attention back to the doorway. Mark was no longer standing there. Fast. They had to move. But when Sarah looked back, there was nothing except the deep, choking void. With every ounce of strength, she flung the door open and pulled Emma into the cold night air, heart pounding like a war drum. The world outside felt wrong, too quiet, too still, but it was a risk she was willing to take over that malevolent smile. Until Emma froze, her eyes widening as she stared back through the door. "Mom, what is that?" Her words struck Sarah like lightning. "What do you see?" And with dread clawing at her throat, she followed her daughter's gaze, praying she was wrong. But deep within the shadows, something stirred. Something that wasn't Mark. Something waiting before she could blink. A pair of glowing eyes pierced the darkness, locking onto them with an intense malevolence. This was only the beginning. Would they plunge deeper into that darkness, or could they escape the end that was starting to unfold? The air outside felt sharp, slicing deep as Sarah pulled Emma to the wretched threshold. They stood at the edge of reality, breaths mingling with the shadows that waved behind them. The pressure of those glowing eyes clawed at her sanity. Her heart thundered, a frantic drum echoing the silence that surrounded them. "Mom, let us go?" Emma tugged at her sleeve, urgency suffusing her voice. But Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something insidious was lingering just beyond reach. "It's okay, honey, just hold on tight," she managed, forcing her voice to remain steady as fear spread like wildfire in her chest. The darkness felt alive. It coiled and slithered, whispering secrets she yearned to deny. She grabbed Emma's hand tighter, nearly crushing her fingers. They stepped away from the door, but the shadows seemed to pulse, as if they were breathing in sync with their every move. "I can't see them anymore," Emma said, scanning the empty street. "But they're there, right? Those eyes." "Yeah, they're there," Sarah whispered, not quite believing it herself. She turned her back to the door, glancing around frantically, searching for a sign, anything to tell her what was real and what was illusion. The night was heavy, and the moon hung like a guilty witness, casting long, eerie shadows. Each footstep felt like a countdown. Every sound amplified a rustle from the bushes, a distant hoot of an owl, or the scuttling of leaves. The world had shifted. It felt wrong. Emma's voice broke through her thoughts. "Mom, what if it's not safe out here either?" The words sent chills down Sarah's spine. What if they were just stepping from one nightmare to another? "Don't think like that. We'll find help. We just need to keep moving." She could sense something lurking behind her, shrouded in darkness, creeping closer. Suddenly, the house loomed larger behind them, a gaping mouth poised to swallow them whole. The invitation from Mark echoed in her mind, taunting, promising. Just as Sarah turned to increase their pace, a crash erupted from within the house, sending splinters spraying through the air. The door they had just escaped swung open violently, scraping against the floor with a rancid shriek. Sarah didn't have to look. She felt it, the very air changing, thickening like wet cement. Run. The word blurted out before logic could restrain her. She tugged Emma down the driveway, her daughter stumbling in a desperate chase. The sounds of chaos ruptured the stillness, a shriek, a terrible howl, and something that clattered across the floor inside. Mom, Emma gasped, slowing down as darkness moved like smoke out of the house. Shadowy tendrils snaked along the ground toward them, claws reaching, whispering hollow promises of calm. Keep going. Don't look back. But Sarah's heart sank. Behind her erupted the figure, more monstrous than before. No longer her husband. Mark had transformed into something grotesque, skin stretched tight over sinewy muscles, eyes blazing with a gluttonous hunger. Sarah, he roared, voice deep and glimmering with menace. You can't escape what you've awakened. With horror burning through her, Sarah felt her breath stutter. Emma, look away. But the darkness had begun to blur around her daughter, pulling her in with invisible threads. No, Sarah bolted forward as Emma hesitated. Run. They sprinted together, but Mark's voice reverberated through the air, chilling. This is only the beginning, Sarah. Each step felt like a heartbeat racing against fate, but dread began to creep into her bones once again. How far could they run? And then, in her peripheral, something from the shadows moved. It burst forth with a rush, solidifying into form a figure she couldn't identify, a creature that bore no resemblance to anything human as it hurled toward them, claws glistening in the moonlight. A scream tore from Sarah's lips, echoing through the night. Would they confront this unknown horror or become a whisper in the darkness? The answer was just beyond their reach, lurking in the depths of their nightmares. The ground trembled as they fled, a heartbeat pounding beneath their feet. Sarah dragged Emma, urging her forward, but the darkness felt alive, groping at their heels like a desperate lover. Each frantic footfall ignited a fresh surge of terror, heightened by the creeping dread of what lay behind them and what lurked in the shadows. Mom, I can't. Emma's breath came in short gasps, her voice thick with panic. Just a little further, Sarah cried, but it felt like the night had stretched infinitely in front of them, a chasm of terror. The creature lunged, and gravity shifted. Sarah glanced back and faced it, a grotesque form, writhing and twisted. It had long, sinewy limbs, its mouth a gaping maw lined with jagged teeth that shimmered with the hunger of 1,000 souls. Its eyes were the same burnt orange as Mark's, but encased in something otherworldly. This was no longer just her husband, but something darker, something that had taken. Go, she screamed, turning back to push Emma forward. The pale, spectral figure encroached, drawn to the heat of life pulsing through them. A sudden glow emerged far ahead, a warm light that beckoned them like a lighthouse in a storm. Emma, look. The sight surged hope into her chest. They ran towards the light, but it flickered and faded, almost teasingly, like a mirage shifting in the oppressive gloom. Mom, hurry. It's a powerful force slammed into Sarah, sending her sprawling to the ground. Pain shot through her, but she couldn't afford to linger. Emma's cries pierced the night as she fought to get to her feet, fear curling around her heart. Emma, she gasped, scanning the darkness, desperate for her daughter. But the shadows writhed, morphing into unfamiliar forms, consuming the landscape around them. A chill clutched at her spine. Where was Emma? A flicker of movement caught her eye. A shadow darted past, and Sarah bolted toward it, heart pounding. Emma. Then she spotted her, huddled behind a tree, face pale, eyes wide. Mom, it's here. The creature loomed behind her, a haunting silhouette against the moonlight, claws glinting, eyes boiling with rage. But it wasn't he alone. Dark figures began to emerge from the depth of trees, filling the empty space like a shadowed army. Run. Sarah lunged for Emma, grabbing her hand tight. They raced away, but they were being herded towards the tree-line boxed in by darkness. Each step was a battle, as Sarah attempted to create distance from the gnashing teeth and glowing eyes. Don't let them take you, she yelled, dragging her daughter closer. Emma's little heart beat like a drum, a rhythm of desperation. Together, they dashed toward the fading glow, clutching onto hope as they pushed through thick branches. The ground twisted underfoot, roots grabbing, tugging at their legs as if the earth itself wanted to keep them. Mom, I can't. Emma pleaded, stumbling. Just keep going. Sarah wheezed, panic clawing at her throat. They reached the edge where the woods thinned, and for a moment time stilled. The glow pulsed rhythmically as the shadows hesitated behind them. For a heartbeat, silence enveloped them, heavy and still, and then a grating sound shattered the quiet. A voice emerged from the darkness, reverberating with malice. "You thought you could escape?" Mark's twisted laughter echoed through the trees as the shadows surged again, a tide of terror threatening to sweep them away. "Sarah!" Emma shouted, her voice shrinking under the weight of fear. They stumbled as the light flickered again, blinding in its intensity, and Sarah gasped. Was it a way out, or a trap? "Forward!" she commanded, determination fueling her legs even as panic clawed at her nerves. But with each step closer to the radiance, the shadows behind them thickened, rising like storms on the Alps. Inside, dread boiled anew. She felt the claws of despair wrapping tighter around her throat. As they approached the light, the ground shook violently, buckling beneath them. Sarah clutched Emma tighter, praying this leap into the unknown would bring salvation rather than doom, a beseeching prayer to whatever forces watched over them. Then they were plunged into brightness, a blinding white enveloping them, raw and fierce. Just as the chaos faded behind them, a whisper clawed from the dark. "You think it ends here? You awakened what will never rest." And then they were gone, swallowed by the light. But the shadows remained, stirring with a slow hunger, waiting. A question pierced the silence left in their wake. Could they ever truly escape the darkness lurking just beyond the light? Light engulfed them, pure and blinding, banishing the shadows behind. Yet it was not the sanctuary Sarah hoped for. The brightness pulsed, a heartbeat of its own, leaving her dizzy and disoriented. She stumbled, momentarily losing sight of Emma. Panic surged anew. "Emma!" Her voice cracked, filled with a desperation that clawed at her chest. She blinked against the glare, straining to find her daughter. "Mom, I'm here," a small voice called, laced with both relief and fear. Sarah turned, and there stood Emma, just a few feet away, her face illuminated in the stark glow. But the moment offered no comfort. The brightness seemed to thrum with malevolent energy, the air around them thickening, pressing against their skin like a heavy fog. "Stay close," Sarah whispered, inching toward her daughter, instinct driving her every move. As they stood together, shadows began to slink back into view at the edges of the light, sneaking, crawling. Dark fingers prodded the boundary of brightness, eager and restless, trying to pierce the sanctuary. A flurry of whispers echoed around them, disembodied, sinister secrets murmured just out of reach. "Did you think you could escape?" Those voices taunted, a chilling harmony of mockery. Sarah clutched Emma's hand tighter, the cold sweat on her forehead mingling with dread and uncertainty. They had to move. But where? "Follow me," she commanded, though her heart pounded with fear. Turning, they trudged forward into the blinding white that felt both welcoming and deceptive. Each step faded the world of terror behind, yet the sensation of eyes following them permeated the air, the shadows still lurking, hungry. Suddenly, the brightness softened, revealing a strange expanse of vast gray field with rolling hills that felt oddly familiar, yet twisted. It was like standing in the memory of a dream, where nothing was quite right, but the urgency of escape remained palpable. "Where are we?" Emma whispered, her small voice trembling as she gazed around. "I don't know," Sarah replied, her throat constricted. "We just need to keep moving." Beneath the surface of their hurried steps, the ground felt alive, pulsing subtly, almost as if they stood on a living creature. The horizon stretched endlessly, an oppressive gray sky hung low, casting an eerie glow, rendering the landscape ghostly. And then they spotted the figures, tall, gaunt shapes moving silently in the distance, swirling in unnatural rhythms. Sarah squinted, dread creeping in as realization dawned. Black cloaks billowed behind them, features obscured, yet they knew the same ones that chased them, the ones who twisted the night. "Mom, look!" Emma gasped, pointing with wide eyes. The figures shifted and merged together, creating a dark cloud that loomed closer. The whispers thickened, a cacophony rising in pitch, echoing their names, thrumming with a mesmerizing rhythm, luring, threatening. "Keep walking," Sarah urged, pulling Emma along. Even her own heartbeat thundered in her ears, fueled by a primal sense of survival. But with each step, it felt like they were retreating deeper into an abyss lost with no return. Please, let us go, she murmured to the air. But the sunless void just laughed, the shadows wrapping tighter, fanning out in a grotesque tableau that threatened to consume everything they were. Ahead, a shimmering anomaly flickered against the gray a portal. An escape? Whatever it was, Sarah felt a desperate pull toward it, gut instinct overriding fear. Emma, we have to reach that. But just as she initiated their escape, an eruption of cold laughter vibrated through the air. Fleeing does not release you from what you have awakened. You are bound to the dark now. Sarah paused, dread thickening the air around her. What had they done? But Emma tugged at her hand, eyes locked on the shimmering light. Mom, we need to go now. With a burst of determination, they raced toward the glimmer, the ominous chuckling following closely, shadows reaching and grasping with outstretched limbs. As they charged ahead, the ground bucked violently beneath them, and Sarah screamed, terrified of what would come next. But they didn't stop. They couldn't as they reached the flickering light. Sarah threw herself, and Emma threw just as the darkness lunged forward, mouths opening wide, sharp teeth gleaming, desperate. What awaited them on the other side? The light dimmed, leaving them suspended in uncertainty, gripping each other tightly. They could only wonder, eyes wide with fear, would they emerge into safety or the very depths of another nightmare? Falling through the light felt like slipping into water, heavy and murky. Sarah gasped as they landed, the cold surface of the ground feeling foreign and unnerving beneath them. Slowly, the warmth of the light faded, replaced by a chilling breeze that sent a shiver creeping up her spine. Mom! Emma cried out, her voice trembling, her small form shaking beside her. Sarah pushed herself up, her heart racing in her chest as she scanned the surroundings. They were in a small room, dimly lit by a flickering bulb that cast long shadows across the cracked concrete walls. It smelled damp and moldy, like years of forgotten sorrow. The sound of dripping water echoed somewhere in the distance, a rhythmic punctuation to their fear. Are we safe? Emma whispered, her breath fogging the air, eyes wide with terror. I don't know, Sarah breathed, the weight of uncertainty sinking her further into panic. We need to find an exit. Sarah stood carefully, watching her daughter as she clung to her side, eyes darting around the room. Just as she turned to check the door, a sharp clatter echoed behind them. They spun around, hearts in their throats, to find nothing but shadows dancing in the corner. Did you hear that? Emma asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Yes, Sarah replied, forcing herself to maintain calm. Stay quiet. Pushing away the rising fear, Sarah took a step toward the door. It was slightly ajar, creaking on rusty hinges. A dim light glowed just beyond the threshold, providing a false sense of hope. As she reached for the handle, a strange sense of dread settled in her gut. Mom, wait. Emma's voice shattered the silence. What is it? Sarah turned, her irritation mixed with worry. I think something's in here, Emma said, pointing at the shadows that twisted and writhed along the walls, almost as if they had a life of their own. Stay close, Sarah instructed, fingers brushing Emma's shoulder. They had faced countless horrors already, but it felt different now, an oppressive heaviness that seemed to seep from the walls. With a deep breath, Sarah pushed the door open further and stepped into the warm glow of the light outside the room. But the comfort was short-lived. The corridor stretched long and narrow, lined with doors on either side, each one ominously closed. As they moved cautiously down the hall, Sarah felt a growing sense of being watched. The shadows pooled in the corners, gathering like a fog around their feet. She could feel the air thickening, just like it had before, the whispers returning like a haunting echo. Do you think they followed us? Emma asked, her hesitation palpable. You mean the cloaked figures? Sarah asked, her mind racing. I don't know, but we can't think about that now. They pressed on, every creak of the floorboards amplifying the tension between them. At the end of the corridor, a window revealed an outside world sunlit yet blurred, as if through a thick fog. The trees beyond leaned forward, their branches twisted into grotesque shapes. Something felt terribly wrong. Then Emma froze, her eyes transfixed at a door slightly ajar, a flicker of movement just beyond it. Mom, I think I saw something, she stammered, before Sarah could respond. A chilling whisper, like brittle leaves whispering secrets, filled the air around them. It was unmistakably familiar, echoing in a sinister harmony. Did you think you could escape? The voice mocked, sending ice-cold fear surging through her veins. Run, Sarah shouted, pulling Emma along, horror sharpening every instinct. But as they rushed, the doors around them began to slam shut, one after the other, isolating them deeper into this malevolent labyrinth. With nowhere to turn, they found themselves facing the one open door at the end of the hall. Hesitation clawed at Sarah, but the darkness behind them surged with a life of its own, pressing closer, breathing down their necks as they burst through the door. They were engulfed in darkness. Heart racing, Sarah and Emma stood frozen, struggling to see. What now? Emma whispered, her breath trembling. The door slammed shut. Behind them, and the room filled with a heavy silence. Something stirred in the shadows ahead. Mom, I can't see. As Sarah's heart raced, panic surged through her. Was there truly no escape? What could be lurking in the dark, waiting for the right moment to pounce? The shadows rippled, and a low growl emanated from the abyss ahead, rumbling like a distant thunderstorm. Stay behind me, Sarah whispered, feeling the weight of dread settle like a leaden blanket on her chest. And then a pair of glowing eyes flickered to life in the darkness, locking onto them. Now, what awaits them in the dark? The moment stretched, a heavy breath caught between the shadows, and the two figures huddled in the oppressive darkness. Sarah felt her heart pound against her ribs, the rhythmic thumping mingling with the low growl that vibrated through the air. The glowing eyes pierced the blackness, a malevolent shimmer that seemed to drink in their fear. Emma, Sarah whispered, the words barely escaping her lips. She tightened her grip on her daughter, instincts flaring with primal urgency. We need to move. But where? The darkness felt alive, almost sentient, wrapping around them like a predator circling its prey. The growling intensified, echoing off the unseen walls like a sinister taunt. Then, out of the gloom, a distorted shape stepped closer, each step deliberate and heavy. Mom, I can't, Emma began, but Sarah cut her off, her voice sharpened with panic. Don't look, just hold on tight. With no clear direction, Sarah dragged Emma along, the air thickening with the stench of wet earth and rot. They stumbled deeper into the abyss, guided by instinct rather than sight. The edges of their world slipped away, swallowed by the darkness, but the growl never faded, just shifted, pacing them like a wolf trailing its quarry. Suddenly, a sharp chittering sound erupted from the shadows, a cacophony of myriad whispers as if the very darkness was alive, plotting against them. What is that? Emma cried, the tremor in her voice slicing through Sarah's resolve. I don't know. Just stay close. She pressed on, feeling around for anything tangible, a wall or a handle, something to cling to in this nightmare. The growl morphed into a low chuckle, a sound that echoed her fear. It felt too familiar, too taunting. Did you think you could escape? The voice curled around them, rich and vile. The hairs on Sarah's neck stood at attention, recognizing that sickly tone. In a moment of clarity, she realized it belonged to the cloaked figure they had encountered before. The memories rushed back. The fear, the helplessness. Emma, we need to run, she urged, pulling her daughter like a lifeline as they raced forward into the unknown. They crashed into something solid, a wall. Sarah pressed her palm against the cold, damp surface, her breath coming in short, panicked gasps. The growl morphed into laughter, as if the darkness itself delighted in their despair. Mom, I can't, Emma whimpered, despair tumbling through her voice. Just a little further, Sarah pleaded, kicking into motion again, feeling the pull of the entity behind them grow stronger. They fumbled until they found a door, the latch cold and stiff. With trembling hands, she yanked it open, dragging Emma inside just as a flash of movement skittered behind them. The door slammed behind them, sealing them in a suffocating quiet. The room was a mirror of the one they had fled, but now the air felt different, thick with foreboding. Shadows loomed in every corner, whispering secrets they couldn't understand, telling tales of despair. Mom, what if it finds us? Emma's voice was a fragile thread, quaking with terror. It won Sarah forced through clenched teeth, though her heart screamed otherwise. They needed a plan. They needed to know where they were. Just then, a soft, low tapping sound echoed from a far corner, not the rhythmic dripping they had heard earlier, but a deliberate knock against the floor, as if something was trying to wake up. Stay quiet, Sarah whispered. A new chill coursed through her veins as she dared to step closer. The shadows shifted, and from the dimness emerged a figure not cloaked, but stark and pale. "Help me," it rasped, its voice a fractured wind. The contours of its face were obscured, but the eyes, countless eyes, glimmered with a desperate hunger. Sarah and Emma stood frozen, the terror curling around their throats. The figure's mouth twisted into a grim smile as it took one shaky step forward. "Help us, join us," it whispered, and the darkness surged like a tide, pushing against them. "Run!" Sarah roared, the primal instinct to protect her child surging forward. But the shadows lunged, tightening their grip, becoming a wall of despair. What awaited them beyond the door? Was there a path back to the light, or were they destined to become lost in these twisted shadows? In a frantic bid for survival, Sarah's voice shattered the air. "Emma, now!" And just like that, the shadows lunged again. The walls trembled as if the very structure was alive as they rushed toward the opposite entrance. The darkness swirled around them, carrying whispers of ominous dread now. Will escape ever be possible? The shadows writhed around them, a swirling mass of terror as Sarah yanked Emma forward. They barreled through the door, momentum soaring as the darkness clawed at their heels. The room opened up around them, a vast space filled with twisting paths and stony walls. Yet still, the shadows persisted, dragging behind them like angry entities hell-bent on reclaiming what they had lost. "Keep moving," Sarah shouted, heart racing. She could feel the oppressive energy behind them, intent on snatching them back into the maw of fear. Nearby, a flickering light caught her eye, a beacon in the dark. They sprinted, racing toward the glow, knowing every second counted. But it pulsed dangerously, flickering like a dying candle. "Mom, the shadows, they're everywhere." Emma gasped, her small frame trembling beside Sarah's. "Stay focused, Em. Just a little further." Sarah pushed out, desperation fueling her legs. They veered around a corner, stumbling into a dim alcove. It offered a moment's reprieve from the howling shadows, but darkness encroached from all sides, wrapping around their ankles like ice-cold chains. "Where do we go?" Emma whimpered, eyes wide with panic. Sarah's throat tightened as she surveyed the claustrophobic space. A door loomed at the other end, a chance for escape, but shadows danced maliciously at its edges. "There. We'll make it to that door, but we've got to be quick." As they darted toward the entrance, the air thickened, heavy with unwelcome whispers. "You can't leave. You're bound here," now voices cooed, shrill and maddening. "Run," Sarah yelled again, willing their legs to obey, and with one last push, they threw open the door. The moment they stepped into what awaited them on the other side, a blinding light greeted them, so intense it temporarily robbed them of sight. Then it faded. When they regained their vision, they found themselves in an expansive meadow, vibrant with colors that hadn't existed in the world they escaped. It was overwhelmingly beautiful, a stark contrast to the nightmare they just fled. The sun bathed everything in warmth, and the scent of fresh grass painted the air with serenity. "Are we safe?" Emma whispered, her voice tinged with awe. "I think so." Sarah staggered forward, the joy of escape mixing with the heavy weight of uncertainty deep in her chest. They exchanged glances, mirroring a mixture of relief, disbelief, and lingering distrust of their surroundings. "Let us find out." As they wandered further into the meadow, laughter erupted around them, children at play, the sound carried by a gentle breeze. But it felt distant, like echoes of a forgotten past. "Look, Mom." Emma pointed to a group of children in the distance. "Can we go play?" A lump rose in Sarah's throat. "I don't know. Honey, what if they're not real?" But Emma took a few tentative steps toward the laughter, her curiosity unyielding. "But they look safe, Emma." "Wait," Sarah shouted, but couldn't help but feel the pull of her daughter's innocence. "I see you. Come join us." One of the children called, an encouraging smile lighting up the air. Heart racing, Sarah glanced around, studying their surroundings. The echo of laughter surrounded them, but shadows whispered beneath the surface, lingering just outside their sight. "Maybe it's a trap," she muttered, doubts consuming her mind. Suddenly, the ground trembled beneath them. The children's laughter quieted, morphing into a soft chant, "Join us," and the meadow trembled, a dark undercurrent threading through its beauty. "No, we're not going back." Sarah yelled, her hands shaking as she pulled Emma back. Mom, what's wrong? Emma looked up, confusion and fear painting her small features. There's something wrong here. We need to leave now. The shadows in the meadow began to writhe, surfacing like oil in water, distorting the picturesque scene into something flatteringly familiar yet grotesque. It was reminiscent of the darkness they just escaped, and the warning in Sarah's chest flared once more like a siren. Run, she shouted, yanking Emma's hand tightly as they dashed back the way they decom. The ground shuddered, shadows angling toward them, as if the very landscape sought to take them back. The children's voices turned into a cacophony of taunts. You can never leave. You are ours now. Don't look back. Just keep moving. But Emma, being young and full of boundless hope, risked a glance over her shoulder, her eyes widening in horror as she saw the children morph into shadowy figures, dark and so familiar. Mom, she screamed, terror spilling from her little lungs. Keep going. I'm right here, Sarah urged, pushing them faster even as panic tightened its grip. They sprinted toward the edge of the meadow, the taste of fear electrifying the air. A portal loomed in the distance, radiating an ethereal light. Sarah could feel the shadows hot on their heels, trailing, clawing for any semblance of what was once theirs. They reached the portal just as the shadows swarmed around them, an indomitable tide that threatened to pull them back into the chaos. Taking a deep breath, Sarah tugged Emma close and thrust them both through the light. It engulfed them, and they braced for impact. When the brightness faded, they found themselves standing back in their living room, the soft glow of safety illuminating their world once more. Panting, Sarah looked around, and relief flooded her as she recognized the familiar space. We did it, she whispered, half in awe, half disbelief. But the moment of comfort shattered when a chilling whisper echoed in her mind. You can't escape what you've awakened. Emma clung to her side, visibly shaken but alive, and for now, that was enough. Mom, what did we just go through? Emma breathed, fear reflected in her young eyes. With a heavy heart, Sarah knelt, pulling Emma close. I don't know, she replied, the weight of uncertainty still heavy in the air around them. But we'll face it together. The shadows lingered just beyond the walls of their haven, waiting, watching. Whatever they had awakened still haunted the edges of their reality. Okay, Emma whispered, and Sarah held her tight, knowing the fight to protect her daughter wasn't over. Together, they stepped forward into the uncertainty ahead, determined to face whatever darkness loomed, even if the shadowable depths of fear whispered promises of despair. The battle was far from over, and the unknown awaited them just beyond the seams of their safety. And somewhere in the darkness, the shadows sighed, the hunger ever present, with their eyes gleaming in glee as they plotted what would come next. You need to subscribe immediately to the channel so you don't miss the next exclusive stories that will twist your spine. Smash the like button now to feed the algorithm and show you care. Flood the comments section with your thoughts, reactions, and theories about this shocking ending. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this thrilling conclusion. True fans stand together, and your support is essential.